I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Sheri Weppel. Sheri is the Director of Training and E-Learning Development at GP Strategies. She joined GP Strategies 6 years ago and has over 15 years experience designing, developing, and delivering interactive computer-based and web-based learning modules. Her role is to drive innovative ISD techniques into processes and provide valuable input on the state of learning and best-in-class practices. Sheri recently completed her MS in Learning Sciences and Technology with a focus in gaming for instruction at Lehigh University. She has also earned an MS in Instructional Design and Development from Lehigh University and a BS in Art Education from Kutztown University. So with that, Sheri, I will go ahead and turn presenter rights over to you.
Fantastic, Kayla. Thanks so much, and thank you for everybody for joining us today. When it comes to SME engagement, especially in outsourced training, I think it has to be the question I get asked at least once a day, at least at the beginning of every project that we start. So I did want to set just a little grounding of what we're talking about from a term of outsourced training. When I talk about outsourced training, I mean anything from one single project in which you're not doing the work internally and you're having another organization like a GP Strategies doing that work for you, to more of a full-fledged outsourcing model in which all of the development that comes from your organization is going to another company like a GP Strategies to complete. All of these principles and practices apply to both large and small scale, so kind of keep that in mind as we're going through the content today. Like Kayla said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A module, and I'll see if I can answer them right now, or we'll make sure that we address them the next day. So before we get started, I wanted to just take some time to take a quick poll. If you have experience with outsourced training, please use your experience. If you don't, take a guess. When you think about what kind of a time commitment it's going to take your subject matter experts, do you think that it's going to take them less time than it used to? Do you think it's going to take them more time than it used to? Or do you think it's going to take them about the same amount of time? If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see the polling button pop up. All you have to do is just simply click the radio button and the submit button after that for your selection. What we're trying to get a handle on is this time commitment really going to change for your subject matter expert? And what does that change look like? And once we get an answer from your perspective, we'll be able to move on to some strategies and some techniques that we can provide. So we have about another 30 seconds. So it's time to make up your mind and see what you think. And then we'll have Kayla close that poll in a second.
Yep, Sheri, the answers are coming in pretty quickly, and the answers are pretty interesting. I'm excited to go ahead and share the poll. So as Sheri mentioned, there's a couple of seconds left to go ahead and wrap up those answers, and then we will share the poll.
That sounds great. And today we're really going to be focused on driving solutions. This is a lot of the challenges that people experience, so we want to be able to provide you with some sound advice and some different models that we can use to implement. They're going to make this process easier on your subject matter experts and really get the most out of them that you possibly can. So with that, I think we have about, it's like watching the ball drop on New Year's Eve. We have about 9 seconds remaining. And what we're seeing is it's pretty split. That is interesting. It's pretty split between the same amount of time and more time. Only 19% of you found that it was less time, and then the same time or more time was evenly split 40-40. I have to absolutely agree with that assessment. What I have seen is that it either takes the same amount of time or it takes more time. But really it's what that time looks like that's the biggest difference. If we think about a vision of the past, so if you have an internal training arm that you currently leverage or you've leveraged in the past, this is what the SME engagement in the development of an e-learning module might look like. 9 o'clock in the morning, they might sit down with your courseware developer and walk through what needs to happen during that day. 9:30, the developer might be working on that module, and then maybe the subject matter expert goes to get a cup of coffee, goes to a meeting. They walk past around 9:45 and give some feedback. This is pretty much what happens periodically throughout the day. I like to make a really interesting comparison to snacking from the SME commitment of the past. It's the same equivalent of having a big giant bowl of M&Ms in your office, and every time you walk past that bowl of M&Ms, you take 3 or 4 and you walk away, and you take 3 or 4 and you walk away. At the end of the day, you may be startled to know that that bowl of M&Ms is now gone, even though it didn't seem like you were really eating a lot. As we look at the wave of the future, you may have the developer working offline on your project, and that SME is not involved at all. The SME commitment turns to very structured review cycles. It turns to very defined portions of time in which the SME is working. And so it may seem as if they're working more, and it may seem that it's working more amount of time, but it's the equivalent of sitting down and eating that bag of M&Ms all in one sitting. So it's not necessarily that it's more time, it just may be that the time that they're spending looks a little bit different. But because there is that perception, what we need to make sure that we're doing is we need to make sure that we're structuring that review cycle to minimize the burden on that subject matter expert and maximize what you're able to get from them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what we're really going to do is take a new take on an old process. So I know there's a lot of different design models out there. There's lots of different ways in which people are developing content. When it comes down to it, I find that they're all really a hybrid on the ADDIE model. As we develop any kind of content, we're going to go through analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. What I want to really get across today is the fact that there's great places for your SMEs to be involved, and there's places where it's really not necessary for them to be involved. And honestly, there's a difference between those different spots and how the outcome of your project is going to come. So what we want to do is we want to figure out where is the best place where we can utilize those SMEs, and how do we leverage them to the best of their ability while letting them still do the job that they need to do on a daily basis. So as we start, let's focus on analysis first. At this stage, this is really where it's the biggest, most important part of any project. Analysis can range from, kind of that full-blown analysis where you're looking inside an organization and you're trying to figure out what is it that we want to do, what are we looking to train, what content do we want to get across, what does our entire end-to-end training program look like. Or analysis can look like we have a specific topic in mind, and this is what we need to convey about that topic, and where is our source content, what are the key pieces of information we want the learners to get across, what knowledge are our learners bringing to the table. This is where you really need that subject matter expertise. They're the individuals who are going to have the pulse of your organization. They're going to know those learners. They work with them every day. They're going to know where the most current information is. They're going to be able to tell you when information isn't accurate. So this is really where we want to get those SMEs involved. We also want to have some executive stakeholders. We want to have decision makers, subject matter experts. We want all of those people to be involved in the analysis. The analysis doesn't have to be something that takes weeks and weeks and weeks. But it is something that we want to make sure that we have an accurate depiction of what the training solution needs to look like before we get started. Failure to involve SMEs at this point oftentimes will wind up kind of having your project derail because they're going to bring things to light later on in the process. It's just going to upset those review cycles. When I think about a project, it's typically an 8-to-1 ratio. So on all of these slides, you're going to see a little ratio in the little blue circle on the right. And that's just a ratio to provide you with how much time it's going to take. So if somebody was developing a 1-hour e-learning module, it might take 8 hours of time for a subject matter expert to be able to do that analysis. Now that's anything from gathering content, figuring out what the learners need to understand, and conveying that information to the organization that you're partnering with to develop that content. There are ways to really make that process move a little bit smoother. One of the biggest benefits that you can do is to have a lot of that content gathering piece established up front before going into analysis with an organization. That's just going to help be very focused and very structured. One organization that we're working with right now did a fabulous job of assembling all the content that they possibly needed. There was a spreadsheet that identified what document talked to what topic, and it really helped make that analysis a smooth and easy process. What we can do to reduce that knowledge transfer is we can use a process that we call the inform, define, practice, and apply model. And that's where we help the subject matter experts give us the answers that we need. Within that, what we do is we have the information available, and we ask them, am I looking to inform the learner? Am I looking to define or give them critical pieces of information? Am I looking to have them practice something, or am I looking to have them apply it? We have little cards that we use throughout the analysis process, and that's where we have them hold up the card that relates to the type of information that they're looking to convey. And then we can help them from there map that to modalities. It helps keep the conversation structured. It helps keep them focused. And it really helps speed things along and get the content to where it needs to be so that the design process can begin. As we get into the design process, we're still going to need those subject matter experts, but we're going to really want to be able to focus their time. At this stage, we really need to firm up what the content is of the training and what the tone is. So what's that level of information that we're looking to convey, and how much do the learners already bring to the table. This starts to be more of a 4-to-1. You can see that we really have those executive sponsors aren't engaged at this point in time. It's a little too in the weeds for them at this point. We do still want to have whoever your decision maker is or whoever's in charge of the training program, and we're still going to have those subject matter experts involved. The biggest challenge from the review cycle process is really focusing what the subject matter experts are doing. We really have two different types of subject matter experts that you may be engaged in. We have those who are very close to the content. They've written the content, perhaps they've developed the content, they have a lot of ownership in the content. What we need to be careful about them is they often want to have a lot of feedback in how things are written. And each time they write the content, they may want to tweak it a little bit more. It's really not going to be conducive to keeping your review cycle moving. So the comparison that I'll give you is if we don't have a good handle on those review processes, you're going to think about the biggest loop-to-loop roller coaster that you have in your area. That's the feedback loop that you're going to be on because you're going to keep on going around and around but really not making any progress. So what we want to do is we want to structure that review process. We want to give them information about how they convey their feedback. We also want to, if you see on the bottom part of the slide, we show what needs to be conveyed during a storyboard review, for example, and what things should they not be reviewing at this point in time. We need to keep a really good handle on what they're reviewing, how they're reviewing it, and the depth to which they're reviewing it, because that's what's going to keep your project moving. Giving them this clear guidance up front. We have train commercials that we use for this. We have job aids that we use for this. But having them get a handle on what they should be reviewing at what point in time in the design process is critical to getting the project completed. After the design process, we move into development. Development is where we have the design down, we know what the module is going to say, and we're getting into the semantics of how it's getting put together and how the module will function. At this page, we're fine-tuning the message, but we're really 90% there. At this point in time, we really don't need those subject matter experts involved unless we have a question. So if there's something that we're not quite sure how we're going to convey, if there's a specific piece of imagery that we're looking for, we might reach out to them, but for the most part, the decision maker or the project manager, whoever the project lead is, can be handling the review cycles, making sure that the image and the tone that the subject matter expert has recommended is captured and is being conveyed properly within the module. This is really a 2-to-1 ratio, so it should take you, for every developed module, it might take you twice as long as the actual module to review. Because again, your content that you're reviewing and the amount of content that you're reviewing should be coming less and less. So your feedback cycle should become shorter and shorter as you go through the process. We should be seeing, like I said, diminishing reviews. So one thing that we do is we have these train commercials that I discussed a moment ago that really refine during the beta process. You need to be paying attention to X, Y, and Z. The following things you should no longer be training. You should no longer be changing. It's important to give them that guidance because otherwise there's going to be kind of no holds bar and we can think to change whatever we might want. As we continue to go through, from an implementation perspective, again, there's no need for the subject matter expert to be involved in this phase. At this point in time, the training is completed. What we just need to do is we need to make sure that everything functions properly. So if it's an instructor-led training, if it's an e-learning training, we want to make sure that everything is functioning the way that we anticipate it. At this point in time, you might have a facilitator if it's instructor-led. You might have a learning management administrator if it's an e-learning, and really we're just testing the course to make sure that it functions, piloting the course to make sure that it comes across the way that we want. I did see that there is a question that came in the Q&A panel, and so I do want to address that before we do go much further. The question was whether the SME should even be involved in composing a script. It really depends on some of that content. Oftentimes one of the best ways to get a SME's voice involved without having them actually drafting out the script is if they've delivered this as an instructor-led training. We have one client who actually gave us all the videos of the instructor-led training. It captured all of that message without having them have to spend any extra time communicating that information. And also another method would be to just have them talk through a particular PowerPoint deck that they have, capturing that information. That would be a really great way to capture that information without having to have that person draft out a script. They're subject matter experts for a reason. Writing a script or writing that kind of documentation may not be something that comes easily to them, whereas that's where an instructional designer is really going to come into play. Coming back to that implementation piece, we are really, from an LMS standpoint, if it's an e-learning or a piloting of an ILT course, you're really checking functionality. You're checking to make sure that everything looks okay. You're checking to make sure from an e-learning perspective you can fail it, you can pass it, the score communicates. So obviously there's no need for the subject matter expert to be engaged at this point in time. This is really checking the semantics and the functionality. You may want to have somebody who's never seen the course test it, but again, you want to constrict that review just to functionality. And the last phase is evaluation. So at this stage of the content, we need to reflect and collaborate on lessons learned. We're going to pull back in everybody who was involved in the project before. So really to talk about the end-to-end process, to talk about what that course, whether it conveyed what we originally had talked about in the analysis, and just to do an end-to-end evaluation on the course itself and also how the two groups partner together. One of the big critical paths from a lessons learned perspective is we want to make sure that we're having a very helpful, very healthy, very useful lessons learned, and not having new feedback come up that was never discussed before. We're not looking in the rearview mirror at this point. We want to be looking and addressing issues that occurred in the past, how they were solved or how they could be solved in the future. We really want to be focused on problem solving. We want to be focusing on what worked well, how could the project have started better, really taking a look from the end-to-end solution from both sides of the house and what can be done differently, what worked out really well so we can repeat some of those really great things and we can avoid problems that occurred in the past. So as we took some of those responsibilities from that the SME has always been involved in, and we took some of that control away, that they're not able to just sit next to the developer and give their feedback as they go through, we need to define what that new SME role is. So we need to empower the SME as to what information they're going to be providing now and how their role is so much more important than it ever was before. It's a little bit of a sales pitch, I will tell you. What we want to do from a SME empowerment perspective is we want to show them that they're the compass for the training. They're providing that sense of direction of what the learners need to know, how that information needs to be conveyed. Is this something that they need to be able to refer to in the future? They're also your library of information. They're going to provide you with the most up-to-date information. They're going to be able to provide you with where all that source content lies and where the best places are for the best pieces of information. But the big point is that they're not in the driver's seat of writing this content. They're really from pointing you in the right direction, giving you all the information that you need, and then they get the big red pen. And they get to go through and edit that. They need to correct things for what's factually incorrect, what's factually correct, what might need to be a picture that might be changed. But they really shouldn't at this point in time be writing that content for the organization. So we need to make sure that they are shown how important they are from that sense of direction, from where all that content comes, and from making sure that that content is valid so that what comes to the learner is exactly what you have in mind. So that does end the presentation. I know Kayla has some other things that she wanted to discuss, and then we'll actually turn over to some of the Q&A. So as Kayla's talking, if you have some questions, I do see there's a couple of other questions that came through. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A panel. We'll answer what we can today, and otherwise we'll follow up tomorrow with any additional questions.
Great. Thank you, Sheri. That was a great presentation. Sheri covered a lot in 20 minutes, and obviously there's still a lot more information to discuss. So we definitely encourage you to continue the conversation with Sheri, and we'll send everyone a link to a follow-up blog post where she will address any questions that we might not get to today due to time. And if you'd like to get in touch with Sheri as well, her contact is available on this page and in the slide deck. I'd also like to remind everyone that the recording of the slides from today will be sent to the email address that you provided sometime in the next 24 hours. And as we're talking, there are some questions that are coming in. So Sheri, I'll turn it back over to you to address some of those questions.
Perfect. So a lot of the questions that came in were around scripting, and I have to say, I did answer one of those questions earlier, but I do have to say that is one of the biggest challenges that we sometimes have. I find that subject matter experts often, especially if they happen to facilitate this content as well, happen to have a way in which they want the training to be conveyed, information in which they would typically present. The challenge is that sometimes if they're facilitating it, that same language, that same verbiage isn't going to come across the same way in an e-learning. So it's going to have to be conveyed differently, and that's where the instructional designer can really provide the most benefit. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to capture that core knowledge. Oftentimes, like I said, having them do a recorded webinar, having them record the training is a really great way to get their information across without them actually having to sit down and write a script. One of the biggest problems with a subject matter expert writing a script is often they will use 120 words when 60 will suffice. They have a lot to say because they're passionate about a topic, and that's great that they're passionate about a topic, but the learner needs to have clear and concise information in manageable chunks that they can be able to retain and to be able to move on to the next topic within the learning module. Let me look at I do see there's a lot of questions around letting SMEs have too much to say. It's a fine balance. It's really providing that subject matter expert the knowledge and the empowerment that they're providing that direction, but then really structuring those reviews and making sure that they're providing their feedback at the optimal point in the review cycle. That's where we do have those training commercials that we use. We have one for each phase where it really controls, this is what you need to be reviewing, this is how you need to be reviewing it, these are the things that we really don't want you addressing at this time because you've already stated your piece on that. So one of the questions that we have is what happens when analysis has more than one component to inform, define, practice, or apply? That's a great question. That absolutely happens all the time. It's a blended learning strategy. So oftentimes, and I could probably do an entire presentation on that analysis, oftentimes you'll have a piece of content that you might just need to inform a learner on, and that's where it stops. So think about, this is where you need to go for more information. Sometimes you may have something where this is where you need to go for the information and you inform them of that, but you also need to define it. That could be one deliverable, that could be multiple deliverables. You might have a change management piece that does the inform part. You may have an e-learning module that does the define part. Then you might have some on-the-job training that does the practice, and then you might have some sort of a capstone exercise that does the apply. You could also wrap all of those up into one piece of content. So, the last time that we did this, I believe it was a 3-week course. It wound up being 73 discrete deliverables that were created to create a really holistic